The Tony Blair Institute has recommended a shift from the traditional fuel duty to a pay-per-mile car tax system. This system would charge motorists based on the distance they drive rather than the amount of fuel they consume. The rationale behind this proposal is to address the anticipated sharp decline in fuel duty revenue as more people switch to electric vehicles, which of course currently pay no fuel duty. Fuel duty has been a significant source of revenue for the government, but as EVs become more prevalent, this revenue stream is expected to diminish, potentially creating a substantial gap in public finances. So here are some of those revenue concerns. The transition to electric vehicles is projected to significantly reduce fuel duty revenue, which currently contributes a considerable amount to the UK's public finances this year, accounting for £25 billion in revenue. Around half of every pound that you spend on your fuel is tax. So the pay-per-mile system is seen as a solution to this impending issue, this impending shortfall. By charging drivers based on the miles they travel, the government can maintain what they would argue to be a steady stream of revenue from motoring taxes, even as the use of petrol and diesel vehicles declines. This approach ensures that the taxation system remains fair and effective, regardless of the type of vehicle being driven. So here are some of those implementation details. This proposed pay-per-mile system would involve charging all cars and vans 1 pence per mile, while heavy goods vehicles would be charged between 2.5 to 4 pence per mile. This proposed system is designed to replace the planned fuel duty hike and ensure that the average motorist is not financially worse off. That's the claim. The Tony Blair Institute claims the implementation of this system could be straightforward, with mileage checks and payments being verified during annual MOT tests. But let's have a look at the environment. One of the primary motivations behind this pay-per-mile tax is to support the UK's environmental goals. Yes, by encouraging the adoption of electric vehicles but maintaining tax revenue from drivers, the government could use this money to invest in infrastructure and green transportation. The pay-per-mile system is argued to be necessary to fund the expensive transition to net zero emissions by 2050. It does, however, carry challenges and considerations. While the pay-per-mile tax system raises revenue, it also presents certain challenges and considerations. One of the main concerns is the impact on people living in rural areas. These individuals often need to drive longer distances due to the lack of public transportation options. To address this issue, the Tony Blair Institute suggests that special allowances could be made for rural residents and professional drivers who rely on their vehicles for work, except of course heavy goods vehicles. But this could complicate a system that was initially argued to be simple. Additionally, the use of telematics, tracking tech such as black boxes, could help lower per-mile cost during off-peak driving times. This is all to incentivise drivers to make journeys when the roads are clear. This, of course, would raise privacy concerns for many, and could smack of greater government control. Well, what's the government saying about all of this? Despite the recommendations from the Tony Blair Institute, a Treasury spokesman has had this to say. He insists there are no current plans to introduce road pricing, flexible or otherwise, adding that the government remains committed to supporting the automotive sector during the transition to electric vehicles. This response indicates that while the pay-per-mile tax system is being considered, the government is keen to stress it's not included in their immediate plans. Note, immediate. Cutting through the spin, the phrase "no current plans" is often a political phrase that means this is under active consideration. A non-denial denial, as it's often described. So let's look at that economic impact. The introduction of a pay-per-mile tax could help public finances by ensuring a steady stream of revenue from motoring taxes, with the looming ban on the internal combustion engine for new cars set to bite into that fuel duty revenue at an accelerated pace. The pay-per-mile system would provide a source of funding plugging that gap left by declining fuel duty receipts. By maintaining tax revenue, the government could invest in the development of electric vehicle charging networks, public transportation, or plug gaps in day-to-day spending. But what would that public reaction be? The proposed pay-per-mile tax has sparked debate amongst the public and indeed policymakers. Some people praise the tax system as a necessary step towards modernising that tax system and ensuring that it remains effective in the face of changing vehicle usage patterns. Others express concerns about the potential impact on different groups of motorists, particularly those who live in rural areas or those who rely on their vehicles for work. Heavy goods vehicles facing a higher level of tax could of course mean that products that are transported by those heavy goods vehicles become more expensive to the consumer. And all of this discussion highlights the need of careful consideration of the system's design. It could face a significant public backlash, particularly if people end up paying more than they previously did. In conclusion, the proposal for a pay-per-mile car tax system in the UK represents a significant shift in the approach to motoring taxation. As the country transitions to electric vehicles, proponents argue that maintaining an effective taxation system is crucial for supporting public finances and achieving environmental goals. While the pay-per-mile system offers several advantages, it also presents challenges that need to be addressed to ensure that it's fair and equitable for motorists. But what do you think? Should you be taxed more for driving more? And how would you feel about a black box or number plate recognising cameras tracking your miles or charging you for using your car at peak times of the day? It certainly is a contentious issue, and one the government may be confronting in the very near future. It can, of course, spark debate.
But also, I want to know your view on this pay-per-mile road pricing issue. Now, we're divided on this one, we are. Tom thinks it's a fantastic idea. I think it's just another way to clobber motorists. And yes, people do want to use their car at peak times. But this is all sort of government control in my eyes.
Have you ever driven in France?
I've driven in France.
Do you know how lovely and clear the motorways are? They're brilliant.
It's very hard to compare. France is an enormous country compared to ours. They have far better roads.
Do you know why they have far better roads?
Well, I know you have to do tolls.
Right. So on the fast roads, there are tolls, which means there are fewer cars on them.
But that's not how it would be. They'd be checking your GPS or using millions of cameras to decide when you're going and driving. OK, what about people who have to drive to get to work?
This is the problem with road communism. When it's all free at the point of use, the only way that you ration it is by queuing. We see this in every sector when it's just a free-for-all.
Yeah.
So if you actually want a clear road, I mean, the way that French do it is brilliant because the fast, gleaming motorways you pay a small fee for, and then the little winding roads, you can go on those for free. So then people divide up and actually...
That's not what the proposal is. The proposal is to just charge you by the amount of miles you drive, and they'll have different charges for the time that you drive. So if you drive at midnight, that's fine, because the roads are usually clear.
Yeah.
If you drive at peak commuter time, which is when you probably need to drive, then you're charged more. Is that fair?
Well, it means that there's less traffic, so everyone moves faster.
That's not very fair, though, is it?
Hang on.
If you need to drive.
At the moment, we are charged fuel tax. About half the amount of money that we pay for fuel is taxed. The idea is we would scrap fuel tax.
Reckon that will happen.
Fuel tax.
Reckon they'll get rid of that. Also, if they set pay per mile at, I don't know, 10p, what's going to stop the next Chancellor, the next budget, just hiking that and hiking that and hiking that and hiking that?
Fuel tax brings in £25 billion this year in tax revenue.
A lot of money to be spent on God knows what.
It's a huge amount of revenue. And, of course, because they're banning the internal combustion engine, that's £25 billion that will be gone from the Exchequer. Now, how do you raise £25 billion? Do it higher income tax?
Why don't we
do you find a different way to tax cars?
Electric vehicles? I don't know.
How would you tax electric vehicles? The amount of electricity you put in?
Yeah, I don't know. GVnews.com/YourSaver. Do you want a little GPS tracker telling the government how much you've driven every day? Anyway,